All right. And so again, welcome. My name is Katie Greeley. I am a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Prevention Education Solutions. And I have been the facilitator working very closely with Montgomery County to present the county this year with the Montgomery County Pride Series. Like I said, this is the fourth series, and we are at the very end of Pride Month. So tonight's goal is to just create a space where young people feel safe asking questions. Myself and my co-host, which I will introduce in a second, will be the queer individuals that are representing the queer community tonight and answering those questions that we have. We have some questions that you've provided with us or submitted that we're going to answer tonight, and then we're also just going to share our own experience. It's meant to be very relaxed and just informative and just authentic to our own experiences. And also it's meant to just answer questions that were proposed to us by young people, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce my co-host, Dr. Moira Kivaluk. Dr. Kivaluk is a medical anthropologist by training, as well as a public health expert, and as well as a member of the community. And before I say any more about her, I'll allow her to share some things about herself. So, hi, Moira. Thank you for being here tonight.
Hi, Katie, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of this Pride series. I've been very impressed with the last couple sessions that I was able to catch. So again, my name is Moira Kivaluk. I am a researcher, a public health expert. My background in sort of gender affirming care, I worked for the Anne and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago in the Gender and Sex Development Clinic, doing a lot of work around fertility preservation, and considerations in kind of reproductive health. And just personally, I am a member of the LGBTQ community. I identify as a queer woman. And so I know this is going to be more about sort of our personal side, but I think it's just important that both, Katie's work and my work kind of touches the community directly and engages with the community on a pretty regular basis as well.
Thank you so much, Moira, for that. Yeah, I think so. Like I said, like earlier, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but I'm also a trans-masculine, non-binary individual who also, originally came out as a lesbian at age 19 or 18. I'm going to be sharing all those details earlier, but I think it's important that not only are we bringing like our clinical experience, right? Because I work with LGBTQ youth, mostly individuals who are trans, non-binary, and exploring gender. But also, like I've gone through this. I've lived, two coming outs now, and I think that's worth something. I think my experience and Moira's experience aren't a monolith for the entire community, but I think it's important that as members of the community, we speak to those individuals who are just starting on this journey, right? Or may have been on this journey for a long time, right? If you've grown up in a very affirming, loving family and you've been able to come out at a very early age, that's a beautiful thing that I think is already different than our own experiences. Or I'll speak to my experience, right? To my experience as a queer adolescent. So, like I said, right, we're bringing like Moira's experience as an expert in trans fertility and working with young people who are asking questions about that before they make that transition, which is very complex, to my experience with as a therapist who works with this community, but we're also bringing our own experiences as queer people. And so this is meant to be not our formal, presentations that we're really used to, but really we're bringing more of ourselves into the conversation tonight, which is I'm really much looking forward to doing. So if I could kind of just lay out some goals for our conversation tonight, because that's what it is, a conversation. Like I would like it to come for myself and Moira from the if I knew then what I knew now, right? A lot of time I spend working with my older queer clients in therapy, talking about the sadness they experienced that they weren't being able to be their authentic self at a younger age, right? So maybe speaking a little bit to that tonight and being like, hey, like this is, I was afraid of my queerness when I was younger, and now it's one of the favorite things about myself, right? So talking about that, the importance of community, something I didn't learn until my mid-20s. I and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But from my experience was like I did not want to go to that gay straight alliance meeting. That's what they called it when I was in high school, right? Gay straight alliance. I know it's that's not the most PC or inclusive name for those spaces today, but now I wish I had done that, and I really wish it didn't take me so long to realize how important community was in my own mental health, in my own journey, and in my own self-love. And self-love, loving yourself, right? It is Pride Month. We're 52 years since the Stonewall riots. Being queer and loving yourself is a radical act. And that sentence really didn't make sense to me until later in life. And now I understand it. Because I work so closely with this community. I work with so many young people who are not as fortunate as I was to have a loving and accepting family, and it takes a lot of work in a certain growing up queer in a heteronormative, right, or cis normative society to really love yourself when you're constantly getting messaging that you are different, that you are not a part of the group, right? So I think that's really important. So what I'd like to do is kind of transition a little bit. And I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask Moira, really, if it's all right with her, to kind of share a little bit, right, about just kind of for some context in terms of like identity development, who you are, where you grew up in, when you realized you were queer, and what that journey was like for you up to date until, being Dr. Moira Kevaluk and doing the work that you do. So are you okay with that, Moira?
Absolutely. And I know that for the kind of remainder of this panel, we're going to be throwing back and forth some of these questions. So I guess co-moderating, Katie, I'll be asking you some questions as well. But yeah, so my name is Moira. My pronouns are she, her, and I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which I now live in Philadelphia, and actually just recently left a position at the University of Pennsylvania at the Perelman School of Medicine. But I grew up in a university town. So Madison, Wisconsin is a college town. It's often been called the Berkeley of the Midwest, or the Austin of the Midwest. So it's a very, politically progressive place. Certainly a politically progressive place, but despite growing up in such a politically progressive place, I would say that my young adulthood and then, through my middle school and high school years, there really wasn't a lot of, this would have been, I'm 32 now, so this would have been, 2006 or so, 2000 through 2006. There really weren't a lot of out teenagers. So there were very few teenagers who identified as queer or as LGBTQIA. I think there was certainly a strong dialogue, as Katie mentioned, a gay straight alliance in my high school, which was a big, diverse public high school with about 3,000 kids in it. But there really wasn't a conversation about identity or sexual orientation beyond sort of what we saw in the media or more abstractly. And I'm just trying to think back to, what are my memories from being 13, 14, 15? There were some sort of icons or celebrities that were out and gay and certainly, supported and celebrated. But when it came to kind of the day-to-day, there weren't really a lot of, other kids or other teens that I could look to, or even young adults, siblings of friends who were out and who were public with their sexual orientation. I think the assumption was that most kids were straight, and there wasn't really a lot of dialogue among my friends at the time, or even my broader school community, or even my town, despite being raised in such a liberal place. I will say, I was lucky in that there wasn't a lot of homophobic bullying or slurs. You didn't hear that kind of derogatory language, or some of what I've heard from friends in other parts of the country would have been kind of in the water in their high school. But it definitely was not a place where I saw myself in the queer community or could ever understand that I might have a place in that community. I identified as an ally at the time. I was a part of the Gay Straight Alliance in my high school. But I certainly didn't understand, the ally side of the Gay Straight Alliance was certainly larger than the out and proud gay side of the Gay Straight Alliance. I think it was a smattering of 2 or 3 students, mainly folks who identified as male. So it was a lot more gay men. And I certainly didn't have any exposure to, queer women, gay women, or anyone who identified as female moving in that space. So Katie, I'll ask you, what was, if you could give me a quick snapshot of what was coming of age where you grew up in your space and time, how was that maybe different from where I was growing up?
So I'm local to Philadelphia. I grew up here, recently moved back, but I grew up on the main line, which, is Devon, Pennsylvania. Went to a public school. Grew up in like a incredibly loving family, right? Middle child, older brother, younger sister, white picket fence, Great Dane, Basset Hound, supported us in all the sports that we played, everything we did. But you said something that like I really resonated with, and it's like I did not see myself, right, anywhere, and therefore I did not know myself. I didn't know that at first I came out as a lesbian, right, was even an option to me. Not alone yet, and definitely I did not know that being non-binary was an option, and I didn't even have a language for that. But for me, right, growing up, when we talk about, I want to make sure real quickly, right, because I want to make sure that we highlight they're 2 very different things, right? There's sexuality and there's gender, and this is a Venn diagram, right? 2 very different things, right? My gender identity was always skewed masculine, like huge Eagles fan, loved playing football with the boys. I even I don't think this is anything I've ever shared publicly, right? Like I even my imaginary friend was my twin named Jack, right? And Jack and I which I now realize as a therapist, right? When I psychoanalyze my own experience, I'm like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Like that was like the the masculine part of me that I could play with. I separated them. I skateboarded. I loved skateboarding. And growing up, right, mainline area, it's a very by the book area. There's so many loving and accepting people that live on the main line. But there is a sense of keeping up with the Joneses and being the athlete, the jock. It's very cliquey, right? Which I think is a fair assessment. And I didn't really fit in anywhere, right? I didn't, the boys didn't want to hang out with me because I was a girl. Right, the girls didn't want to hang out with me because I dressed and looked like a boy. I had a bowl cut at the time, but that just felt so authentic to me. That just I never thought about it. It's just who I was, right? I didn't think about it until I really started to realize the politics of gender and I started to feel it, right? For individuals who are cisgendered, right? So y'all in the audience, right? Individuals who identify with their sex designated at birth, right? You're born a female, your sex is female, and you feel are female and you present female. You don't really think about gender in the same way that a trans or non-binary person thinks about gender, right? Because once you're trans or non-binary and you don't match with either, instead of smoothly going down a road as male or female, you're bumping up against gender constantly saying, "Ooh, this doesn't feel right," or "That doesn't feel right," right? And so I started to feel that right around, I would say, the beginning of my puberty, right, 11 to 13. And I started to get bullied for being a tomboy, right? Everyone told me I was a tomboy. And then I quickly assimilated, right? Grew out my hair, started wearing, girl pants when I wanted to, and I didn't really look at that part of myself, and I didn't have the language, right? Because there really were no, people that were visible to me, and that was my gender and my sexuality. I wasn't necessarily, people young kiddos start to get a grasp of their sexuality right around the same time as like, puberty, about feeling attracted to the opposite sex and stuff like that. I just didn't really feel attracted to anybody. And what I think now, looking back, right, at my experience, I realized I was attracted to people. I just didn't know what that was. I didn't know that that was me being a homosexual, a queer person. I think it's important, and I'm so glad that you're my co-host on this um, during this discussion tonight, because I think what's super important, and we both touched on, is visibility, and that queer people grow up to be happy, healthy, successful individuals, right? And I would like to think that we both fit into that category, knowing what I know about you, and hopefully you feel that way about me, right? So part of this conversation and the Q&A that we're about to kind of go into is to talk about that experience, right? To acknowledge that, yeah, being a teenager is hard, but being a queer teenager is harder, and like this is how you get through it, or this is like what I wish I'd known. So with that, I think we're going to transition into our Q&A. I think I just got into my adolescence, but I think that's good enough. And then I think a lot of the you're going to find out more about Moira and myself as we go through these questions, and we talk about our experiences growing up and navigating LGBTQIA adolescence. So, by the way, I'm going to pause. I don't think I said my pronouns. My pronouns are she, her, which are super important. So, so just so y'all know, for those who are attending, if you want to, we have, like I said, we have a list of questions. But if you'd like to submit a question anonymously, you can do so through that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to do that. And then I will Moira asked the first question, which was submitted again by an adolescent, and I will let her do that.
And yeah, there are no bad questions, there are no wrong questions, and there are no dumb questions. So happy to take anything that comes up in that Q&A. And again, I will get more into, I think you heard my sort of high school years, which was, there was no visibility. I didn't really have anyone to connect with, but I didn't end up, kind of exploring my own identity until college, when I was a bit older. So I want to ask Katie, this is the first question, and it was submitted by someone in Montgomery County, a teen in Montgomery County, simply asks, how do I know if I'm gay?
All right. And when I was looking at these questions, I was like, man, I don't feel like I have all of the answers to every single question. And this one specifically, right, because I think it's different for everybody. And so I think the fact that you are asking this question is super important. I don't necessarily think it means that you are gay, but it means that, yeah, you're exploring your sexuality. And as a teen, that's very, very normal. We got to normalize that, right? So, I would ask you, why are you asking me, right? Are you feeling something? Are you feeling attracted to an individual who is the same sex as you? Are you drawn towards queer content, right? One of the beautiful things that adolescents have today that we didn't really have younger was there's so much visibility in the media, right? In television shows and movies and comics and books, that they can look to and say, wait, I see myself on that screen. Do you see yourself in other queer characters? Are you starting to have feelings for an individual who is designated the same sex as birth as you? And are you bisexual, right? Like these are, and so like, are you gay? Are you bisexual? Am I straight? These are all really normal questions that I think we need to normalize teens asking. The fact that you're asking says that you are allowing yourself to at least think and consider that homosexuality is a possibility, which is healthier than certainly what I did when I was younger. So how do you know if I'm gay? Keep asking yourself that question. if you feel an attraction towards somebody, listen to that, right? Whether again it's the opposite sex, the same sex, feel free to explore that. That's okay. Sexuality as well as gender, right? Like I said, I came out as a lesbian at age 18. I started really, that evolved. I cut my hair, right? Then I started playing with gender a little bit more. And then I really realized, like, wait, like I didn't realize until I was like 25, 26 that I was like non-binary. And now it took me, I'm 32 years old to really to own that trans identity as well. So, these things are ever evolving and ever changing. Listen to your guts. Know that if you are gay, it's 100% okay. And I think the fact that again you're just even asking this question is you're on the right path, regardless of the answer. Yeah, Murray, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's just being open-minded and curious. If you're asking yourself that question, I think there's probably something more to explore there, or just to think about, or even just you might be asking yourself because you're reflecting on a friend's experience. Maybe you just had, your best friend just came out to you, and it's someone you feel really close to, and you're trying to understand, well, if this is something they're experiencing, is it something that I'm experiencing? How do I feel, differently or similarly in relationship to this other person? So I definitely think the question means there should be more questions, but I don't think anyone, no one really knows your insides or your identity other than you. And getting to know yourself is a lifelong process. We are all constantly learning new things about ourselves, shedding old skins, stepping into new chapters. So just keep exploring, keep asking. And, if it feels good, definitely bring that question to, someone else you trust, someone you love, whether that's a friend or a parent or another trusted adult in your life. If there's someone that you feel comfortable maybe exploring that question with, a therapist, a school counselor, it's always good to be open to having those conversations, not just in your own head, but also out loud with other people who care about you, who you trust, and who have your best interest at heart. So yeah, I think that wraps up our first question. Katie, did you have a...
No, what I just did is I also put my email in the chat box. Like, I welcome young people that I work with every day. I do a lot of gender sexuality work, but I also do a lot of substance use work. I say, email me if you have any questions. If you're a young person looking for resources or wanting to explore this more, I can point you in the direction of some content that, might help you answer or learn more about yourself, or as we spoke to earlier, what might help you see yourself in others, right? Because I think that's super, super important. All right. I guess it's my turn to ask you a question, correct?
I think so.
All right. So what is one thing you wish your younger self knew about being queer?
To sum it up in a sentence, there are many, many ways to be queer. There are many ways to express your identity. And you can be yourself, and there's room for you too. So I think I use this story so I mentioned that, I did not, come out until college. I met someone and, fell in love with someone of the same sex as me. It was kind of, unexpected in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden I felt like I needed to step into this new identity. So, what does it mean to be a lesbian? I started asking myself questions like, how does a lesbian talk or walk or dress, or what does a lesbian like to do? I liked to do a lot of activities that, I was involved in sports growing up. I didn't, I think there are everyone knows, there are stereotypes about, things that lesbians enjoy, whether that's softball or, sensible hiking shoes. I think there's a lot of stereotypes that go along with, same for, what do gay men like? I think there's a lot of stereotypes that float around, particularly at that time when I was coming out. And I remember that at the time, this was probably the mid 2000s, there was a very specific look that was very in fashion among young, hip lesbians in the town where I went to college. And it was a very specific pair of American Eagle boxer shorts, hiked up kind of high on the waist, with a pair of kind of baggy, more androgynous jeans. And I remember going to the mall on a mission. I was going to buy this outfit and I was going to wear it out to a party with my friends, because this is what, stepping into my new identity, stepping into my new, my new identity as a lesbian, this is what I needed to wear. And I remember I got dressed for this party and I put this outfit on and I walked in the door and I immediately turned around and went home, because I did not feel like myself. I did not feel comfortable. I certainly did not, I was there to enjoy time with my friends, but I was so self-conscious about what I was wearing that I couldn't even enjoy, the party that I was at. I think I was 19 when this happened. And I remember I went home and I said, never jeans again. It's, at the time I mainly wore, dresses or skirts when I would go out to parties in college. And I said, you know what? I'm going to have to just wear what I'm comfortable in. And if I don't look gay enough, everyone's going to just have to be okay with that. And I use this story, I mean, it's such a silly example, but, clothes and the way that you present yourself to the world. And in many ways that's that's one of the key areas we think about gender or gender expression. But it goes so much deeper than that, really to thinking about, what does it mean to be queer or trans or non-binary or whatever that kind of new identity you might be stepping into. What does it mean to look or act or be, right for that new identity category that you might be stepping into? And I think it's really important just to remember that there really is no one way to be gay. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. There's no one way to be trans. Trans is many things. Queer is many things. Being a lesbian is many things, being gay is many things. And so it's really important. And I would definitely remind my younger self that, it's okay to be your version of, to take on, new chapters in your life or new identities, but you can stay true to yourself and true to what that means for you. And so I don't know where those jeans or that pair of boxer shorts ended up, but certainly not in my closet. And I think I probably gave them away to a friend. The jeans may have ended up on the curb at some point when I moved out of my college apartment. So how about you, Katie? What was one thing that you wish your younger self knew about being queer?
I think you're so scared of this. Like I would say to my younger self, like, you're so scared of this part of who you are. And I get that. But one day it's going to be the absolute most favorite part of who you are. Right. Even again, like I really, again, cliche, I went to college. The moment I was taken out of my very kind of like, my environment where I grew up, I figured it out. And then I was terrified. And then I remember coming out, slowly to the people in my life. And every time I came out, I was crying. Right. Every time I came out to a friend, even when I came out to my mom, I was crying. And I would always say, it's just, I don't want you to think about me this way. It's just such a small piece of who I am. I'm Katie. I like this, and like I'm passionate about this, and I go to this school, and I minimized it instead of like celebrated it. Right. And I think what I realized now, looking back on my experience, is there was still a lot of shame there, right? And a lot of internalized homophobia that I was experiencing because, growing up, being in high school, about almost 15 years ago at this point, like it was very, very different than it is for young people today. I carried that with me. And I would say, it's still with me today. But I said earlier, like, queer self-love is a radical act. I really believe that. And I really try to practice that. And I really try to like just be who I am in a way that is, especially during Pride Month, visible, loud, authentic, unapologetic. not like, offensive. Like, I don't think sexuality or gender is offensive, right? But just unapologetically myself, right? Um, and it's taken me a while to get here. And I think sometimes when I think about my own experience, that makes me sad that it's taken me so long to get to this moment of self-love. Because, and like I said, now, right, as a 32-year-old, my gender identity and my sexuality and my community are the things that I am the most proud of in this world. Um, you know, there's some other things for me, right? Sobriety is a part of my journey. I'm also proud of that. But like the relationships I have with the people in my life, like I'm proud of that, right? Including like my partnership with my partner, all of those things. But yeah, I just, I want to like, if I could look at like young Katie, right? The idea makes me emotional just thinking about it. I feel like just like you are beautiful the way that you are. You're gonna be you're gonna turn into an adult that helps other people, and that it's okay, right? That's what I would tell my younger self. And that hey, go to that GSA meeting, go to that, go find other queer people, right? Because now I graduated in 2007, and slowly, like my experience, right? People come out after high school. They kind of, and you see like, oh, this person who went to NYU, they're out. Oh, this person who went all the way to California, right? They're out, right? And like, oh, like okay, that makes sense, right? And there's like, when I run into these people when I used to go home, my parents still lived in my hometown. There was like we see each other because we lived that experience of growing up in the area that we grew up in as queer young people, and that like part of me wishes we could have been there for each other when we were younger. And so I would say go like other queers, other gay people, other lesbians, other trans people, they're your friends, they're your community. Be kind to each other. You will receive that kindness back. And being kind to other queer people is, an act of self-love, right? Because whenever I was ever, and I did when I was younger, said homophobic things, did homophobic things, did transphobic things, right? Because I was conditioned to do those things. It was actually an act of, self-hatred, because that's who I was, right? So be kind to the other queer young people in your life. They are your community, and being kind to other queer people is an act of self-love. All right. I think so here's one, right, that I think we can both answer. I'm going to start by asking you first, Mary. Is that okay? What can I do to support a trans friend whose parents are not supportive?
I'm guessing this question came from, probably someone who's, a teen, maybe even a little bit younger than that, who had a friend come out to them. And I think the number one thing that I would say to this person would be, if your friend's parents aren't supportive, then you need to be as supportive as you can possibly be, because your friend has just brought you something where they need to feel safe. They need to feel affirmed. They need to feel heard. They need to be seen. So do everything that you can in your capacity to affirm them, love them, make them feel seen. Because if every drop you put into the bucket of affirmation and love can counteract even a little bit of what they might be facing at home or with parents or with broader family that may not be quite as supportive or quite as accepting, that's really important. At the same time, though, you don't want to be the only source of support and love for that friend. So think about, who can you bring in who's going to add more of those drops of affirmation and love? Do you have another friend who maybe you can encourage them to be open with another friend in your friend group? Is there, a trusted adult in your lives, maybe a teacher who is part of, supporting LGBTQ students at school? Is there a school counselor? Is there someone that you can reach out to add a few more drops of sort of love and affirmation for your friends? So how can you be a connector where you're not the only one, affirming and loving your friend, but building up their resources, which can counteract some of that potential negativity at home or issues with parents who are having trouble navigating their identity and their kids' transition. And I think the last piece is definitely think about, how can you help your friend connect to other, trans or gender expansive or queer young people, right? Assume this question might have come from a kid who doesn't identify as, LGBTQIA plus. Maybe they don't have any other friends that they can think of who might share that experience. So, how can you find supportive community outside of that? Is there, a resource group or maybe a community center or a youth center in your town? I mean, kids today are really good at finding resources in their community online. They can find, community centers, youth centers, even the local library. Your local library might have, a Pride Day, celebration for a young adult fiction book that both of you could read and enjoy together. So really find ways to add those, what I call kind of drops of love into the bucket to support your friend. And also maybe even think about, your own family. If you're the friend who comes from a supportive family that would maybe welcome your friend with open arms, can you talk to your parents? Can you talk to, the adults in your life? Can you talk to your family and think about how you can kind of include them in that sense of welcoming and love? Can you bring some of that energy to your friend through your, hanging out at your house and having them over for dinner and having them feel like they're a part of, a community that really loves and cares about them, even if they're not quite getting what they need at home. Katie, what would you say to, what can I do to support a trans friend whose parents are not supportive?
First off, I want to say I love everything that you said. I have some like strategic tips, right? So, when an individual comes out as trans, a lot of people, the coming out experience is sometimes like step by step, right? I tell one person I trust very much, then I tell that, slowly they, give me support, then I tell someone else, right? So let's say, right, someone comes out to you, tells you that they're trans. Ask them what feels most affirming. Pronouns, name. And then if you're the first person that they've come out to, right, it's important that you also have a conversation about moving forward. Okay, how would you like me to, address you moving forward? Do you want me to use they, them pronouns? Do you want me to use their name, right? When someone, we're dropping, just so y'all know, like preferred pronouns, it's just pronouns now, and it's not like preferred name, it's just name, right? Because if someone says that's my name, those are my pronouns, that is their name, and that is their pronouns, like as simple as that, right? So how do I, when can I, is this a name you want me to use just between you and I when we're together? Are these pronouns that you want me to be able to say it for everybody? If they're not out to their parents or they don't feel like their parents are supportive, obviously there's a conversation around like, all right, can I use this name here? Should I not use this name in front of your parents, right? Because we don't want to out somebody. So when you out somebody, that is like, basically what that means is you are telling other people that that person is queer, trans, lesbian, gay, bisexual without that person's permission, right? Happens accidentally all the time, but there needs to be, when someone's, unfortunately, right, we are in 2021, a lot of amazing things have happened over the past 2 decades, is my experience as a queer person, but we still have a long way to go. And when we look at the reality, especially for trans kiddos, teens, and all the anti-trans legislation out there right now, the attitudes towards what it means to be trans and not validating people or affirming people's gender identity, which is a really real experience, right? When we look at the data, we want to have a conversation about them, about their name, their pronouns, when it's safe for them, and then how can I support you, right? I love what Moira added about, having, if you come from a supportive family, inviting them in, having them say, hey, like, I would love to make you feel comfortable at our house with my parents. Can I share that this is your name, this is their pronouns? And they might say no, and that's okay. And they might say yes, absolutely. And like, what we've seen time and time again for young people, and there's just one trusting adult in their life that affirms their gender identity, that significantly reduces symptoms of anxiety, depression, and the thoughts of suicidal ideation for trans individuals. So don't underestimate your ability to make a difference in your friend's life. I'm sorry that your friends doesn't feel like their parents would support them. But again, like, you know, you presented us with this question, and I think that that's within itself speaks to like what kind of like friend you are and how good of a friend that you are. So thank you for asking that. Thank you for being a good friend. You know, again, as a queer person, we need allies in real life. They're super important. So thank you.
Katie, I have another question for you. So this is coming from a kid. Hi, I have known I was queer for a while, but I don't know how to come out. Any advice?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I think the biggest, you know, the hardest part about coming out, and I'll speak from my experience before I do advice. Kind of if I knew what I knew now, right? If I knew then what I knew now. The hardest part about coming out, or what it was for me, was like, what's going to happen after I come out? I don't know, right? A lot of anxiety associated with the unknown in the world, right? So, who do you trust? You know, who are your people? Go to them. And, you know, I would say you know, one of the things I think I did right, and there's no right way, you know, first off, let me say this. I wish we didn't have to come out, okay? Right? I wish it was just like, oh, you got a girlfriend, great. Oh, you got a boyfriend, great. Oh, like you feel most comfortable as non-binary, fantastic. Like I love you and let me support. Like I wish that's how. Like I wish we were in a post-coming out society. We are not there yet. So who do you trust, and do you feel safe coming out? Those are the first two questions that I would ask you. If you feel safe and you trust somebody that you want to come out to, you know, take them aside. You know, I would always recommend anytime you're having an emotional, serious conversation that you are sober. And, you know, say that you want to share something with them because you love them, and that you hope, regardless of what you share with them, they'll love you, and tell them. Now that's simple. It's easier said than done. I think that's the, yeah, easier said than done, excuse me. But, and there's no guarantees. Obviously, if you feel safe with that individual and you feel, and you trust that individual, you know, that's something that you've identified. But, you know, I would start with the people that you're very close to, and then as you kind of understand your sexuality, or as you understand your gender more, start to share it with other individuals. That's based on my perspective. Other individuals I know have kind of just taken to social media and announced that they are gay or that they are trans. And that's kind of beautiful too. But right, I think that's a very privileged approach, right? Not all people feel safe enough to do that. And sometimes, like, some people might not feel safe to do that, but they're brave enough to do that. This is a really complex topic. It's so personal. You really got to just go with what feels right, what you feel safe with, and who you trust. Those are the things that, like, trust your gut feeling about who you feel safe with and who you trust, and what feels authentic to you. You know, and that's not a, you know, a play-by-play, you know, it's not a playbook to coming out, but there is no playbook to coming out. So just make sure you feel safe again, and that you trust the individual that you're sharing this information with. Mary, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks, there's a sense of that coming out is, you know, one big conversation that they have to have with every individual in their life. And in truth, you know, for me at least, you know, coming out was a phased thing, and it's something I still have to do on a very regular basis. You know, every time I start a new job, something might come up about, you know, my spouse or my partner. Every time I move into a new space at work, with new colleagues, every time I'm in a new social setting or social group, coming out is a lifelong process. But I think that culturally, you know, it's been kind of constructed or built up into one big conversation or one big scary conversation. And I think typically that's usually, you know, folks thinking about coming out to their natal family, their parents, or maybe their siblings. Less so perhaps their friends or family. But yeah, coming out is a series of conversations, and they look and feel different depending on who the person is. How close are you to this person? You know, do you feel that you owe them, you know, a bit of background on kind of your journey and what you've walked, or is a simple, you know, statement enough? And I think that's really important for each individual to figure out for them what feels most authentic, and also what feels, you know, comfortable and like they're protecting, you know, whatever privacy they'd like to protect, right? Like I have many examples of, you know, coming out over the years where I didn't maybe have a specific coming out conversation, but I referenced, you know, a partner or someone I was dating. And that was really all the explanation that I felt was necessary at that time or in that moment. But that is also a coming out, even though I didn't have a formal sitting down type conversation. And I think often it's what people mean when they say coming out. You know, coming out is a lifelong process, and it happens all the time in many, many different ways for folks. And you know, I think there's another anecdote I want to share from my own, I guess, coming out process, which is I had an actual conversation with, you know, my parents. The first time I fell in love with a woman and I started dating her, and I had a very, you know, formal conversation with my parents. They were very happy, very, very happy for me. They said, you know, we're very happy that you're in love. That's wonderful news. But, you know, your personal life is your own. Like you can share as much or as little of it as you like with us. And I think that really empowered me to think about, you know, for me, my personal life was my own. And so I didn't, you know, go through the list or the roster of every single friend of mine from high school and come out individually to each of those individuals. But I did, you know, say to other friends, you know, this is who I'm dating. You're more than welcome to share that with whoever it comes up with. And so I actually didn't have to come out to all of my friends. Some of my friends kind of shared that information or that exciting or happy news with other friends of mine that I was dating someone new and it was a woman. So coming out isn't always, now on the flip side of that, being outed. So wanting to keep your privacy around someone you're dating or your sexual orientation, and having that information shared against your will. I was very lucky that I did not, you know, have that experience, but I also was ready and willing for, you know, friends of mine to share. And I made it very clear that that was okay. I made it very clear that, you know, if you're talking to mutual friends or catching up with someone from high school, feel free to let them know that, you know, I'm dating this woman. I'm really happy about it. Everything is going really well in my life beyond that, because it's not the biggest thing in my life. It's just one thing. So yeah, coming out as a conversation, it's an ongoing, you know, series of events and often conversations, but often, you know, just an aside in the course of normal interaction.
Yeah. It's interesting, you know, like I've had, thank you for sharing that, Mara. I've had two coming out experiences, right? So like I said, I spoke to my, like, you know, gender, sexuality, right? Venn diagram, right? I spoke to my sexuality, the very traditional coming out, telling one person by one person, right? Always got emotional. And then at age 30, 31, I did the other thing that I was talking about earlier, right? Which is I posted you know, and something that I think younger people today, Gen Z, right, and younger millennials are probably more familiar with coming out, that we didn't have access to social media, right? When we were 18, 19, we couldn't just post a picture of the person that we were dating, right, during Pride Month, right? And then, you know, about a year and some change ago, right, I posted a photo of me for the first time after I had top surgery, right, on, like, you know, living my most authentic self, like on like a dock in Maine, and I just posted that. And then everyone knew. And that was really liberating. That felt, you know, like I asked myself the question, am I giving people too much information about who I am? And my answer when I reflected on that was, no, this is who I am and I'm proud of who I am. I like the way I look, right? That self, that when I was like that queer self-love is a radical act. Like I look in the mirror and I love who I see. And like, it's, it felt, how I spoke to earlier when I was speaking to my younger self, my experience when I had the short hair, I skateboarded, I played football, I did all those things. And I never questioned it because it just felt like that's what Katie did, because that's what Katie liked, right? Um, it felt like when I looked in the mirror that first time, right before I posted that photo, it was like, oh, that's who I've always been. And that's my authentic self. Um, and so I didn't have to have a conversation with people, nor should I, right? 15 years later that I went to high school with that, yeah, I'm non-binary, transmasculine, non-binary. That's who I am. And I love who I am, right? Like I didn't need to do that. It was just, this is a photo and move on. And that felt very liberating. Whereas my other coming out experience was, um, person by person. But at age 30, I'm independent financially. I paid for my schooling, right? I have a house. I pay, and it wasn't going to hurt me professionally. And so like, I was again in a very privileged position to be able to do that. But I think it's important because I was just thinking of that. I could speak to both of those areas of coming out. Yeah. Maria, it looks like you were going to say something.
No, I think everyone navigates their coming out process at different times throughout their life, right? Like, and it becomes more and more kind of routine, or as one becomes more comfortable in their own identity, and over time as you grow older, and you become more confident kind of in yourself, it becomes less of a nerve-wracking experience and more of a standard. So I have one kind of closing question, and I'm going to ask just Katie this. This kid asks, I think I'm non-binary, but I was told that I'm too young to really know by my friends and my family. What should I do?
It's a great question. And let me first off by saying, you know who you are. You know who you are, right? I spoke earlier about like, if you're cis male or cis female and you move through the path as that gender, you don't come into a lot of conflict and you don't really think critically about gender in the way that a trans person is constantly thinking about gender, right? When they are moving through the world, either as a female designated at birth or a male designated at birth, and bumping into everything because that does not feel authentic, right? So you know who you are. Your friends and your family who are telling you you are too young to know who you are, they might need a little more education. And that's okay. Let me just put it this way. I think in 2019, the number was only about 18% of the population knows a trans person. So people are afraid of what they don't understand. And now that trans issues are on the front line, right, and they're visible, and there's legislation that's anti-trans, and there's myths about what affirming medical care looks like for the trans population, used as scare tactics from people pushing this anti-trans legislation. There's a lot of misinformation, or rather disinformation, about what affirming someone's gender starting at a young age looks like. So what I would say to you is listen to that. That part of yourself that you're saying, I don't feel like a male, I don't feel like a female, non-binary feels appropriate to me. And that's okay. Explore that, right? What does it mean to be non-binary for you? What does that look like? Is that, engaging or wearing makeup, but, or leaning towards masculine, or a mix of masculine and femininity? That's amazing, right? Explore that. Know that like there's no one way to be non-binary. That's the beautiful thing about being non-binary, right? That's what I love about it so much. It's this beautiful mix of both. And I would say, for your friends and for your family, if this is something that you've been educating yourself with, and my email is in the chat. If you have any questions about resources that wants you to help explore your identity, please feel free to shoot me an email and I can send you those emails. I'll also be following up with all the attendees of today's series with some information and resources that you can locate that touch on these questions. So look for that. But continue to just like acknowledge that part of yourself. It's a beautiful part of who you are. If there's content that you really feel has helped you understand your own gender identity, and if you feel safe, I always encourage young people to take that content and share it with their parents, share it with their friends, and say, this is why I feel this way. Okay. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be our job, and it's not our job, but the responsibility of educating our loved ones on their sexuality and gender often falls on queer people. And we want to be accepted and loved so badly that we will do anything to make them understand. Sometimes, if we feel safe, they still might not understand. They still might not have an understanding of what you are experiencing because they are not living in your body, right? They don't know what it means to be non-binary or trans. But if you're feeling that, just acknowledge that. I'd also say if you want to talk to someone about it, ask your parents if you can get a therapist who you can talk about these feelings with. And a good therapist will affirm you in your non-binary identity and support you, right? So too young, right? You're never too young to really know who I was. I knew who I was starting at 3 years old. I knew who I was. People told me, society really told me I didn't know who I was. And so I wasn't able to be myself authentically until I was 31. That's a long time to wait to be who you are. So you know yourself better than anybody else. Please reach out if you have any questions. And I will be providing additional resources, like I said, in my follow-up email to all of the attendees tonight. So yeah, that's all I have to say for that question. Moira, do you have any thoughts or anything you want to share?
No, I do think the climate has definitely changed significantly for young people who are coming of age, exploring identity, kind of stepping into, I guess this is Pride Month, so stepping into their pride power as we move through June. Yeah, I think it's definitely different for every individual. I mean, you can take Katie and myself, two very, very different people with very different, kind of coming of age stories and coming out stories. But we've both arrived at a place of, I think, being out and proud and comfortable, happy, and successful in where we've ended up. So I wish nothing but the same for every kid who's navigating these questions and these big transitions earlier and earlier in their lives. This has been really nice. It's been great to hear your perspective, Katie. I think, we both have similar things to say, but certainly very different kind of lived experience growing up, especially.
And likewise, Moira, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be on this panel tonight. Again, everyone, it is the end of Pride Month. Happy Pride. I hope that you are in some way, if you are a queer individual, right, celebrating who you are and all the beauty in that. Again, queer self-love is a radical act. I wish you all nothing but happiness and health. I want to thank Montgomery County for supporting and funding this month's Pride series. I will be following up, like I said, with resources, but also an evaluation for anyone who would love to share their thoughts on tonight's presentation. We hope we're bringing similar content and maybe doing another Pride series next year for members in the community. Again, I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Happy Pride. Thank you, Moira. Thank you, all the audience members, and everyone take care.